Good evening, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, in this video, we are going to be talking about how it is that luxuries destroys the economy. And now, this is something that I have shared quite a bit on this channel, and it's really coming from the Cantillon essay, Cantillon effect, and how it is that the separation between the rich and the poor really take place. Now, to understand that it's ultimately the consequence of being in luxurious experiences, luxurious items, and it's that experience essentially that the rich are looking for that makes everybody's life miserable. And when I was reviewing the Cantillon essay, I just looked for the word luxury inside of the essay. And ultimately, the word luxury is used about, I don't know, 15 times, 20 times inside of the essay, and almost all of it, all the usage of that word is in chapter 8, part 2, chapter 8, the further reflections on the increase and decrease of money to the state. And holy moly, to think about what it is that he says about luxuries every single time within this essay, it's really telling about what it is that's going on when it comes to the problems that we now face within the economy, especially those with, the struggling and the lost jobs and the hardships that they face, and how it is that they are going to rebound from those downturns that they have experienced. Well, if you think about what it is that's going on within the capabilities of those who are at the upper end, the more that they continue on with their operations and the way that they behave, the more difficult it becomes down at the very end of the line. And so those people suffer the most from the rich. The rich make their lives miserable. And really, when you start going through this essay, you start to see why. It's not because they made a bunch of money, and it's not because they have a bunch of money. It's because of what they have done with that money. Now, I'm going to share with you chapter 8, all the spots where the word luxury appears. And it starts right off at the abstract. And this says, the balance of trade can result in economic power, but this also causes the economy to lapse into luxury and decline. And so when you think about just that very statement, this increase of power, this awesomeness that occurs, and what happens when you have awesomeness in your life? You go and you experience some luxuries, and this will lead to decline. He goes on to say, oops, where's the next one? It comes up. All right. Let me back it up here. Okay, so the very next time he says it, it's a little bit later in that same chapter. It says, moreover, when the state in question could keep a balance of trade and its greater abundance of money, it is reasonable to suppose that this abundance will plunge many wealthy individuals into luxury. And now that's very reasonable to think. Right? If you got a bunch of money, what are you going to do with it? It's going to plunge many wealthy individuals into luxury. You can't avoid it. You can't avoid it because think about it for yourself. If you won the lottery and you came into a great abundance of money, tell me you wouldn't go out there and want to spend that money and do something with it. It would be fun. It would be exciting. It would be something that you would go and play around with and do things you've never experienced before and had before. You would go and enjoy the luxury of it. Right? It says, they will buy paintings, precious stones from abroad. They will want silks and rare objects, and they will set such an example of luxury in the state that in spite the advantages of its ordinary trade, its money will flow abroad annually to pay for this luxury. You see what happens here? So here it is. These people think hey, it's awesome. We got all this awesome money now. What do we do with it? Well, we're going to buy the things that don't exist here. We're going to buy those how did he put it? They'll buy rare objects, precious stones, paintings, right? All these silks, these silks and rare objects, right? This is the luxury. Goes on to say a little bit further down again, the next time he brings up the word luxury, it says, thus, it would seem that the state or it would seem when a state expands by trade and the abundance of money raises price in land and labor, the prince and legislature ought to withdraw money from circulation, keep it for emergencies, and try to slow down its circulation by every means, except compulsion in bad faith, to prevent its goods from becoming too expensive and avoid the drawbacks of luxury. So the very next time he brings it up, he's saying, man, what should the state do when it comes into an abundance of money? Well, it should act appropriately, right? And avoid these drawbacks of luxury. Next time he brings it up, oops. All right. When the money becomes too plentiful in the state, luxury will follow and the state will fall into poverty. That's the very next time he brings it up. Let me read you a little bit further up because this is a really good one. It says, the borrowing road, which holds an advantage in the present, leads to a dead end and is but a flash in the pan. To restore a poor state with a shortage of money, a constant and real balance of trade is needed on an annual basis, as is in the development through navigation of its articles of manufacturing or articles and manufacturers produced cheaper and thereby suitable for exportation. Merchants are the first to make their fortunes, then the lawyers may get part of it. The prince and tax collector get a share at the expense of all the others and distribute their graces as they please. When money becomes too plentiful in the state, luxury will follow and the state will fall into poverty. Okay? So think about it again from the luxurious experiences. They could have done awesome. They had this balance of trade doing all this great things. Right? Had the best manufacturers producing that great stuff, sending it out there. Everybody had a piece of the pie. But that's what happens when you fall into luxuries. Eventually, the state falls into poverty. This is a good one. Nevertheless, the same Romans, before losing an inch of the land of their vast states, fell into decadence through luxury and impoverished themselves by the reduction of money which circulated among them. And it was this luxury that caused the empire to pass into the hands of the eastern nations of the Orient. See how he blames the luxuries again? I mean, you think about it. This is how he talks about luxuries. There's no awesomeness when he talks about luxuries. He's not talking about how great they are, how great the people are by experiencing these luxuries, and he talks negatively about it the entire time, saying this is what's impoverishing you, right? They fell into decadence through luxury and impoverished themselves by the reduction of money which circulated among them. How do they reduce the money? It's because they're buying foreign articles of clothing, food, manufactured goods, rare objects, precious metals, whatever it is, or precious stones, right? Whatever it is, and they're buying that stuff and sending their money, the precious metal, out, all the gold and silver. So long as Romans' luxury, which did not begin until after the defeat of Antiochus, king of Asia, around AUC 564, came from the product of the land and the labor of vast estates of their domain. The circulation of money only increased instead of decreased. The public was in possession of all the gold and silver and the copper mines in the empire. They had the gold mines of Asia, Macedonia, and Aquileia, and the rich mines, both gold and silver, of Spain and other countries. They had several mints where gold, silver, and copper coins were struck. In Rome, the consumption of all the goods and merchandise drawn from their vast estates, provinces, did not diminish the circulation of money any more than the pictures, statues, and jewels themselves. although the wealthy landlords spent excessive amounts for their feast and paid 15,000 ounces of silver for a single fish. All that did not diminish the quantity of money circulating in Rome, given that the provinces made tributes regularly, not to mention the money brought in by lenders and by their governors with their extortions. The amounts annually extracted from the mines increased the circulation in Rome during Augustus' whole reign. However, luxury was already on a very great scale, and there was much eagerness not only for the curiosities produced in the empire, but also for jewels from India, pepper and spices, and all the rarities of Arabia. You hear it again. However, luxuries were already on a very great scale, and there was much eagerness, not only for the curiosities produced in the empire, but for the jewels from India, pepper and spices, and all the rarities of Arabia. All those luxuries. Right? Goes on to say this. After his death, Caligula spent all of Tiberius's treasure in less than 1 year, and it was then the abundance of money in circulation was at its highest in Rome, and the wind of luxury kept on blowing. Yeah. Estimated that in the time the empire exported at least 100 million good lord, sesterces annually. This was more than was drawn from the mines. Under Trajan, land prices fell by 1/3 or more, according to the younger Pliny, and money continued to decrease until the time of Emperor Severus. Money was then so scarce in Rome that the emperor collected enormous quantities of wheat, being unable to collect enough tax money for his enterprise. Thus, the Roman Empire declined through the loss of its money before losing any of its estates. That is what luxury brought about and what it always will bring about in similar circumstances. And so if you listen to what Cantillon had to say about luxuries, there was never anything of a benefit that he ever talked about from the luxurious experiences. And he talks about how it's going to happen. It's going to plunge many wealthy individuals into doing this. But the drawbacks of it are huge. It's enormous. It makes everything more difficult, and it will fall into decline as a result of the move into luxurious experiences. It's because of the luxuries that the decline will take place. And that's what's really scary for a lot of people out there, is that they look to the idea that they have this luxurious experience coming to them and not realizing, by even looking for the luxurious experience within life, it will then destroy the economy within itself, and every single person goes for that. What else would you go for? Would you go for something that's less than a luxurious life? Of course not. That's why this is going to be ever increasingly more difficult as time goes on, and the rich will make it essentially miserable for everybody who's not rich, because that's the natural consequence. Many wealthy individuals will dive into luxury. When they move into luxury, it creates the drawbacks, the downturns, the failure, and eventual collapse into poverty. I mean, Cantillon describes it very well. And he uses the word luxury many times, or the use of the word luxury is used many times throughout the essay, but never more used than in chapter 8. Right? The increase and decrease of money to the state. And when you think about the reflections upon that, and how it is that this overabundance of money that flows through the country, and just everybody just loves it and just screams how awesome it is and how great the experience is from it, only to result in a downturn of economic failure and misery and pain. Most people do not see this. They don't see how this works. They don't think about it being this way. They know it's the rich who did it, but they don't understand why it's the rich who did it. They don't understand that if they themselves had their opportunity, they would create the same outcome for everybody out there, because that's the natural consequence of being human. You get the money, you want to have a better life. And there's no doubt about it. And to know that to be the case, if you have an ever increasing amounts of new money that pours into the state, what do you think is going to happen with it? Of course, it's going to concentrate into the hands of a few. And if they got a concentration of money, what do you think they're going to do with it? They're going to buy rare objects and oddities and silks and all the spices and wonderfulness from Arabia, right? Because that's what the wealthy do. It's been very well known throughout history. That's how Cantillon was able to describe it as well as he was. And then to think about how it is that he was trying to share back in the day, what it was exactly that was driving the inequality, and he blamed it on luxury. It's the luxurious experiences, it's the luxurious items, it's the concentration of wealth that is now creating the problems that we will face with the fall and the pain and the misery and poverty. And it's not hard to see it. It's pretty apparent when you think about what it is that's going on. When you shut off the new money system, you're going to have a complete and utter collapse. Do you think that's really going to happen? Probably not, right? Do you think the rich are going to do anything other than what it is that Cantillon described? Plunge themselves deeper into luxurious experiences on the abundance of new money? I mean, nothing is greater than to increase your standard of living, to have that wonderful experience, and nothing is more painful and miserable than to lessen that. He says that, and everybody knows it. That's why you don't see the rich giving it up. I mean, think about it. I mean, you've worked pretty hard for what it is you have. Are you giving your stuff up to somebody who has less than you? Of course not. You're still trying to go for what you got. And then you look at somebody who has more than you and say, well, they should give it up, not you. And on up the line it goes. And nobody ever gives it up because nobody's going to do that. They would much rather dive into luxurious experiences. And so as we think about how it is that this occurred from history, and what we think about what it is that's going to be happening into the future, you can pretty much come to the conclusion that if you inject new money into the system, the people who have first access to that money are going to be spending it at face value on luxurious experiences, which is going to drive the inequality and eventually create the pain and misery. It's the rich who do it. And if you had the money, you'd do it too. Because that's what humans do. And even if you understood the Cantillon effect, you still want the new truck, right? Yeah. You still want the nicer house. You still want to take that vacation. And you want the nice food, right? Because food, conveniences, and pleasures of life, well, that's wealth. And that's what you spend your money on. So how is it that it can move any other way? It can't, and it's not going to. So it's very important to understand that this is how it plays out and what it is that's going to happen when the new money turns off. And if you're begging and hoping and praying that that's what happens, then everybody falls into pain and misery. Yeah. But if you don't think that's going to happen, what is going to happen? The expansion of new money, credit, right? And the people who have first access to that are going to be the ones who are going to benefit from that system. So how do you position yourself in accordance to what it is that's going to be taking place going into the future? And I can tell you, if you're going to try and work and trade an hourly wage, it's probably going to be difficult. It's probably going to be difficult. And that's, the unfortunate consequences of being on this timeline. If it was 50 years ago plus, 60, 70 years ago, you would have had a okay opportunity, just as a regular old person going out there working your life, doing your thing. But today, it's the inequality has moved too far. It's much too deep. And to know that you have to then position yourself in accordance to that, like you can't go and just skip over a bunch of what it is that history has shown. Right. And if you want to be that property owner, there's a path to that. And it doesn't come down to like, well, I just need to work hard and the government needs to lower interest rates. And if they did that, then everything would be fine. No, it won't. I promise you it won't. All right? Because this isn't the way that it goes down in history. People don't work a job and get to buy a house. Like that's some kind of grand illusion that was fed to the American people throughout these years of being from an industrious nation to one that's now a debtor consumer nation. Unfortunate consequence of being here now is that we got to experience from our parents and our grandparents that exact method that doesn't work today. So yeah, good luck, right? There's no politician who can fix this. Cantillon already described it. You have, now been left behind. So there's no point in attempting to do it in that way. Like, I mean, some people could try and they might do it and they can work damn hard to make it, figure it out, work side hustles, save it all, cut back, do everything you could possibly do in order to get the house, and then struggle with everything that you do in order to make the payments on it and maybe scratch by for a little bit. And that very well could be a very, decent outcome for some people out there. But even for the average everyday person, there's nothing inside of that that's even possible because the payments are too excessive for the wage that they earn. So they don't even have the opportunity to do it. No matter how much down payment they have, they still say, "I'm sorry, man, you just don't make enough, in order to make the payments." And so at that point, it's like, there's only a handful of people out there who are really going to be in a position in which that they're going to be able to actually acquire that house. And those people are probably going to be the asset holders, ones who have positioned themselves into a secure rate of interest beyond that of their occupation so that they can become the property owners. And that's what's really strange for a lot of people out there. They're like, they don't want to think about it that way. They're like, well, you have to save for a down payment. I was just like, no, you have to be an asset allocator and eventually you can become a property owner. But if you're not the asset allocator, don't even bother because your wages are going to be very difficult. Like you could probably do it with your wages. Don't get me wrong. You could probably do it. You're going to struggle really hard. Yeah, you're going to be pushing hard to deal with that. Every little thing that happens in your life is going to be a painful experience because it's going to be so hard to deal with it because most people are going to be strung out at the end of their wages in order to make the house payment. So that's not going to be easy to go with. But if you're an asset allocator the entire time and then eventually you get into property ownership, that's not a pain. That's not a hard thing to do. It makes it much easier to deal with. And that's really how, the property owners throughout history have gotten there. I mean, that's how Cantillon described it. It's not me who's making that up and trying to say, hey, man, let me tell you what the rules of the new game are. This is the way the rules of economic forces work. And this is what Cantillon recognized and what it is that's now taking place and probably has been for a very long time, except for the short little timeline that our parents and grandparents got to be on where their wages were enough. But that's not the way it is now. And so we have to look to history and we say, okay, well, what happened throughout history that says, what is it that the property owners did? And Cantillon said those industrious people who do not raise their expenditures, who, essentially hold back on that so that they can secure that rate of interest beyond that of their occupation, become the property owners. Those are the ones who do it. So how do you want to do it? No. Is there ways of making it happen without doing it that way? Sure. Right. There's plenty of ways. House hacking is one of the greatest ways to get into property ownership without having to take that step of becoming the asset allocator first. There's plenty of ways to get into property ownership without having to do it that way. But history says that industrious people who do not raise their expenditures, who try to secure a rate of interest beyond that of their occupation, are the property owners. I mean, it doesn't seem difficult. I mean, it seems kind of hard and depending on how much money you make, it might be a little bit longer for others than for some people than others, but that's how it's done. Not this, goofy way that you get a good job and you hold on to that money as long as you can and you save up for 10, 15 years so that you can make a down payment and then struggle to make the payments for the rest of your life. That's not the way this is supposed to be done, not throughout history. I mean, that may be the way it's done, but it's not supposed to be. That's not what history has done it. The history says you're going to have to go a different way. And that way is through asset allocation. And you can think about that. Just, how many times did Cantillon mention luxuries and what negative view in tone to that message that he was trying to deliver within the essay about luxuries. Like, luxuries cause downfall, luxuries cause poverty, luxuries cause separation between the rich and the poor. When abundance of money comes in, people will dump into luxuries, and that's the result of it. You know? So it's like, to me, when I think about all the problems that people face out there in the world, and I'm thinking, what kind of vehicle do you drive? How new is that vehicle? You got pretty nice shoes. Let me see that watch. Right? I don't want it. I just want to know where your mindset is and what it is that's really going on within this nation that's creating this huge inequality that's happening. And I look at what it is that's taken place within the mindsets of most people, and dang, if it ain't decadence, all right? Look at it all. It just runs rampant through this country. Yeah. Simon owns Balenciagas. Hey, Penny, what's happening, man? Best purchase yet. I don't. I have some Nikes with my name on it, though. Yeah, that's pretty luxurious, right? That's a pretty luxurious experience to have Nikes with your name on it. It's crazy how old that book is and how smart the guy was. Just imagine if he was alive today with the economy where we're not. I can't imagine Cantillon thinking about the economy nowadays. Like, this would blow his mind. Like, I don't know. He would just be amazed just by like the idea of cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. It was just like, what a concept. But the point being about it is, I don't know, like, he was a pretty smart guy in the sense that he was able to recognize these underlying economic forces and be able to describe them. But ultimately, think about how easy it would have been to recognize them back in his day, right? Because nobody had any idea of what economics were. They certainly they might have understood politics in a lot of ways, but not like Cantillon understood how it is that the flow of money comes in, and there's only so much money in the direction that it flows to. It's pretty incredible, some of the things that he was able to recognize. And then if you kind of step back and think, okay, he's talking horses and wagons, we got cell phones and airplanes, we got cryptocurrencies, we got communications unlike anything that he could ever have possibly even imagined. But you can still see how they're playing out. You can still see how these forces are going, right? Like, I mean, think about what it is that he says would happen to the inequality of the people once they have risen as an industrious nation and then start importing the foreign products. I mean, this is exactly what's going to happen every single time. And there's very little doubt that it's going to be moving any other way. Is there things that could happen in order to prevent these outcomes? Absolutely. But they don't occur, and most likely they're going to look like the boot on the face of humanity, and you're going to get a lot of pushback from it, and they're going to say that this isn't an American way and this isn't freedom and all this other stuff that goes along with it. And they're absolutely right. And capitalism is destroying everything. Okay, fine. That's a great excuse. It sounds like a cop-out to me that you just don't want to actually become an asset allocator, but whatever. I mean, if that's your choice, that's your choice. The unfortunate thing that most people will then move into is that by doing these things with the blaming and the looking at like the social aspect of it, and facing the consequences of voting for this way or that way, or whatever banking system and regulations that go into it, and you start looking at all these different things, what you are doing is essentially ignoring what it is that Cantillon is saying. This is the symptoms of all this politics, all this greed, all this craziness. War, right? War is a big one. People and this is where I think a lot of times people hear me speak, and they think, man, you really dialed in how the forces are playing out, right? And then they almost kind of relate it to being a game. But this isn't a game, right? I mean, people literally die. And so it's not a game. This is life, and this is the reality of the situation, is that everybody now faces their own economy. They own their own economy, and very much like what Cantillon was describing that would happen with the nation, you can do that to yourself with your own luxurious experience. Go buy a fancy car and then not be able to make the payments on it, and see what happens to the rest of your life. Right? You look good, everything was awesome, but then once you can't make the payments, you get a downturn in your money. The new money starts flowing off. Starts turning off or whatever, and it's just bang. That's it. The whole thing comes down fast. He's ignoring us. Am I ignoring you, Miss Deja? I'm sorry. Do you have a question for me? I want to see you model the UE brand. You guys have seen the sneakers. All right. Anyone here aware of or have any thoughts on how Cantillon died in the possible murder house fire? Yeah, right. Well, you got to think. I mean, he was like, kind of. I don't know if he was necessarily like an upstanding citizen to the people out there. I mean, he was a banker and he understood where it is that you could place money in order to get the biggest return. So I'm pretty sure he was probably not exactly like revered as like this really awesome upstanding person. I just don't think so. So he probably made a lot of people very unhappy, and a lot of people probably felt that he made them very poor. But I don't know any other details other than what I've read inside of this essay, because really the essay is where I find kind of the important information from. But yeah, there's a kind of a mystery behind all that. Being a truth-telling banker gets your house burned down. Yeah. But I can't remember exactly what this essay, wasn't it kind of like almost moved around in somewhat of a secrecy? I don't know if it was necessarily secrecy, but it was only like exchanged amongst a handful of people out there until like really it was like what, 100 years ago or whatever it was. But it's not it like even I don't really hear a whole lot of people who really discuss a lot of the things that are going on within the Cantillon essay in a way that relates it to like everyday economic realities. We read articles and we'll say, well, when these people are talking about how it is that these farmers can no longer produce within the nation because of the foreign imports, what do we know? This is Cantillon. And everybody says, no, it's not. It's politics. It's just like, well, politics is another symptom of it. And you're probably going to see a lot of evidence of that. And you're going to blame politics from it. But really what's going on here is that your nation is growing as a rich place and you can no longer afford to make it there. You have to buy it from foreign competitors. And that's the unfortunate consequence of it. All right. Benny says, hey, at least he didn't speed like Simon. No. I don't know. I don't think the Suburban speeds. I don't think it can. I mean, it's powerful. It's a very powerful truck, but it doesn't really go that fast. Although I really haven't, with the new tires on it, mind. All right. Benny's comments. Just like Patton getting ran over by a military vehicle. There's only one original copy of the Cantillon essay, and it's in a museum. Everything else allegedly is gone. Oh, is that what it is? Huh. Simon, do you think China will be successful in avoiding the Cantillon effect? No. In fact, they're already suffering the consequences of it. You can see it. Like, I mean, just think about what happened during COVID when all the nations were like, hey, we're bailing out of China to go find other places to manufacture, go manufacture in Vietnam and get closer to the United States and manufacture in Mexico. And so China was losing their manufacturing base in a lot of ways. And, really, when you think about it, it's kind of like not really China losing it as much as like they can even push their manufacturing into these other nations. Canada does it with their lumber production. Like there's Canadian mills operating here in the United States. Interfor, Canfor, all those people, they all have operations here in the United States, cutting down, using American domestic energy supplies, all that other stuff. But it's a Canadian company operating here in the United States. And so you think about how it is that other nations can manufacture and still produce in those other cheaper nations. China is going to lose their manufacturing base in a lot of ways to the cheaper manufacturing locations, whether that's energy, labor, or just distribution locations. But they're still going to end up owning a lot of it. in the end, because they are the manufacturer of the world right now, and nobody can really compete against them. It's kind of like nobody can compete against the United States and being the debt issuer. Nobody can do it, right? Like even if they wanted to, the United States is by far the biggest debt issuer out there, who produces the world's safest liquid debt. Nobody else is going to be able to compete against that, just like nobody can really compete against China when it comes to manufacturing. So if China wanted to, they could essentially destroy anybody out there when it comes to their manufacturing, because they could just literally just overwhelm them with product to the point that they just can't be profitable anymore. And China knows, hey, we're going to take some heat, right? And we're going to get blasted in this too, like they're going to lose some manufacturing. But because they produce an overwhelming amount, they can lose a good chunk of it and still be the producer of whatever item it is. So that will come to an end at some point. Like they just essentially will not be able to compete at some point in that way. At this point, they can do it, right? Just like the United States can do it. And eventually, at some point, it will fail too. And when it does, it's all going to be one miserable existence for everybody out there. And I don't look forward to it. And I don't really think it's happening. Right? I don't even think it's close. When it does happen, it will be crazy. But we're not there, right? And I don't think it's going to happen. Are there going to be other manufacturers? Absolutely. Are there going to be other debt issuers? Absolutely. But is anybody able to compete against those two? Probably not in the same way. Not for a while. Not anything to worry about in my mind, anyway. Simon, are you currently house hacking? I would say like semi, in a way. Like not exactly. Not officially. How about that way? Looking into water storage and supply as an important economic factor, the recent summer in Europe has slowed or stopped many. Um, that's kind of an interesting one. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, so it rains like all the time. And water is not one that I really think about in a way that a lot of other people would. Like if I was in California or something else, then it would be a big topic. It would be something I would think about quite a bit. But when it comes from the sky, like, every 2 days, 3 days, or if not every single day, then it's just like you don't really think about like water being a short supply kind of thing, especially when you live in the rainforest like I do. So for a lot of people, I can see where that would be very concerning. And in that sense, yeah, you got to deal with it. Um, I don't I don't know, like, I mean, I just haven't internalized that kind of thing, in making that the most important feature of my economy, because it's like almost non-issue in my economy because of where I live. So, yeah, I could see somebody living in the desert, totally different view, right? They would have something totally different to think about and how to internalize it and deal with that, because there would be a completely different lifestyle, of existence. Yes, Dolly Parton loved everyone, and it was a beautiful life. Are you able to explain how you lost your vehicle? I lost my vehicle? I'm in the UK and we had 60 days without rain, and it's normally wet here every week. Unprecedented dry. Yeah. Data centers are horrible. Like, so here's something. Um, I don't know how many people like actually have means of survival outside of like their comfort of their home. But like having some simple abilities is going to be like kind of like, the difference between whether or not you're going to have like a, a bad day or a decent day, a bad day or a really bad day. You know, um, Filtering water is is probably one of the most important parts. It's not necessarily having the water, like that's going to be important too if you plan on staying in a location, but if you got to bail out or you got to move, it's filtering water. And so for example, like I have a few life straws, right? So they're not, we don't use them for anything other than that in case of emergency situation. Those are pretty cool to have, right? So you can just pretty much stick this thing into the nastiest water and use it like a straw, and it'll come, you'll get clean drinking water from it. So having things like that, having something simple like, being able to start a fire, being able to like, send a signal like a flashlight, these simple little things that people kind of take for granted are things that, should be really like at hand's reach pretty much all the time. And I know a lot of times people will think, oh, like your bug out bag. And I'm thinking, no, not even like a bug out bag, like your tools, right? The tools for life. You never know when there's a situation that comes up and you're going to need this. And it doesn't mean like you're bugging out or you're trying to go anywhere. You're just trying to exist throughout this world. And all of a sudden you need a first aid kit for some reason, right? Having these things close to you is not something that a lot of people think about. And it doesn't even really need to be that much stuff, right? I mean, if you really think about it, it's like having a pocket knife, having a lighter, having, some, I don't know, you got to think about what it is that you need in your existence. For me, like I have like a pack that has like, a little sharpening stone, markers for writing things down, like just the simplest things that you would need. And again, it's not for bug out, it's just for daily use, in case in case you need it for whatever. And those type of things, once you kind of have those in your life, everything else becomes like almost kind of irrelevant. You don't even really think about it as being a consequence, right? Because you essentially got a backup of some sort, or an idea that you got the comfort of that. So you're not stressed about it. You're not worried about it anymore. And I know like for a lot of people, they're like, dude, that seems weird. But it's not. Like I remember when I was growing up, we all had backpacks. And in the like we would always have a change of clothes or a hoodie or something inside of our backpacks in order to just deal with our day. And for me, like that is something that is like kind of like stuck in my head. My brother-in-law, he's really good at it. Like he's the master at it. It's like, but he's ready to bug out too. To me, it just became like just something that you would just have for life and just carry it around for that general purpose of whatever it is that was going on. Very few people think that way. And then once you have that, everything else is like that. You don't stress it. Yeah, you just don't. Do you still have Gold Machine? That was a great video. Do you still have Gold Machine? That was a great video. Was that the recent one? Just small security item when it comes down to not having the fluid of life, right? I mean, when somebody is just like, dude, what about water? And I'm like, well, I got a life straw and I live like in the jungle. So it's like, I'm not worried about water. I mean, I'm like, that's very low concern. But like, if you lived in the desert, that would be like top concern. So for me, that's simple, right? It's just like, well, okay, I got to be concerned about water. Okay, got one. Okay, I'm done being concerned about water. Simmons, the effort to reshore fell flat just as you predicted. Thank you, Benny. I appreciate that. And yeah, that one was actually pretty easy to see. Just like we've talked about many times here on this channel, it's like it's going to be very, very hard to compete against somebody who's willing to sleep on the ground and build the same thing that you want to build. Right? So, like, once that's underway, it's like there's no way that you're going to bring that back. San Diego is gorgeous as well. Yeah, I agree. I actually really enjoy California. Southern California is one of the coolest places in the world. I mean, like, not just because I grew up there either. It's like it really is. Like Oregon's really nice too, but you have to really enjoy the rain. You have to really like not be bothered by it. And that's really where I think a lot of times it's very difficult for people to be able to handle the Northwest. I mean, it can be quite a downer, a bummer, because it's always gray skies and it's always like, locked in your house kind of thing because of the weather. And in that sense, it can be very, it can be very, have a very deleterious effect on the conscious and in how it is that you're feeling about life. But most people who grow accustomed to it actually kind of enjoy the rain. We find it, actually somewhat comforting. Especially in my area, when you have the rain, you have less people because we're fairly tourist oriented kind of area. So when it's raining, there's less people around, and so that makes it easier for traveling and shopping and doing all the other stuff. So it actually becomes more convenient when it rains, And so again, like we actually enjoy a bit of that. Oh, you moved from Northwest Portland. It rains like Northern Ireland there. I never lived in Portland ever, but I do live in the northwest corner of Oregon. Um, Penny. Different beauties, love them both. Life is good. Spelling is for losers. I totally agree. Deplorable. And not that I would know if I spelt it wrong or not. So I mean, you know. uh, Simon has made like 18 gold machine videos. That's probably true. Yeah. Visit Simon. My face is glued to the scenery as we travel. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Like somebody told me, what was it? Justin, I think, was saying it or something, was talking about how they like I don't know if it was somebody they knew had come up here to like the northwest area or the northwest corner of Oregon from like the eastern Oregon where there's like no trees and it's very desert and it's very open. You can see for just miles and miles. Here, you can't see very far. Like unless you're looking down the road or you're looking out over the river or you happen to be like on top of a mountain looking out over scenery, like for most places, you can't see very far because all you're going to end up looking like it's just a few hundred yards before you're looking at a pile of, before you're looking at trees. And that's all you really see is just trees everywhere you look. So unless you're like looking across a field or down a road or out into the river or, like a scenery of like a mountain, up on a mountain or something, you don't get a view. You're like, everything is just like trees everywhere you look. And so for somebody who grew up in a very open country, where there wasn't a lot of trees and it's very like big sky kind of thing, and you can just see for miles, they feel claustrophobic in the area. And I could see why. Like, I mean, after somebody had mentioned that, and I think, like I said, I think it was Justin who had mentioned that, I'm driving around my area and I'm like, yeah, it is kind of closed in around here. Like everything is all like, kind of crunched in. There's trees down on sides of the highway. There's no really way that you can see for miles in any direction unless you go to a location where you can see that way. But it isn't provided for you just in the general view around here because it's just so much vegetation and stuff. What are we talking about? I thought we were talking about luxuries. I guess Astoria is a luxury. All right. You see a lot of green on the Pacific Northwest coast. There's Justin there. What's happening, man? All right. 48 minutes here. Let's give it another 10 minutes, guys, and then we're going to call it quits. Is there anything else we wanted to bring up about the essay? Talk about the luxurious experiences that separate the rich from the poor and essentially is going to be driving this inequality into a desperate situation for most people, even if they are attempting to live their life accordingly to the rules. They're going to end up losing out because of this experience of the Cantillon effect that is now taking place. To know that you need to become the asset holder or, try really damn hard in figuring out your strategy. There is no really easy way of fixing this situation, and it certainly can't come from the politics of it. So knowing how the economic forces play out and how it is that you can position yourself accordingly for it, I think is probably going to end up being the best strategy out there for just about anybody. And that is owning your own economy. So what position are you in? Like, are you the debt burden that you need to pay off, or are you in the position in which you're trying to figure out how it is that you can get into those cash flowing assets? These are big questions and big differences for a lot of people to face. And, as you start to, realize some of the positions that you can take and the strategies that you can go into, it's very different for a lot of people on what it is that they want for their outcome. Some people are dedicated to the property ownership, and I totally get it. Like, I mean, I'm got this property and I would love at some point to rent this house out and move into another location and kind of do the same thing and, skip along and make that sort of process happen. But at this point, I'm really enjoying raising the family here and having this experience. And in the meantime, I am loading up on, assets when I can, or getting out of the debt like I am right now. So, knowing the underlying economic forces in my position with it, I know that a lot of other people aren't going to be playing that same game. And I think this discussion and how the luxuries, or the wind of luxuries that is eventually going to drive the miserable experience for everybody, how that takes place, why it takes place, and what you can do about it for yourself is going to be like, it's going to be the ultimate, goal of all of us, I would assume. 9 more minutes. Very cool. I will be back home in a few weeks. All right, Simon, you spelled Astoria wrong on the board behind you. Well, I didn't. And I didn't spell that. Do you think that's my handwriting? Come on. You made me look. That's what you did. Pittsburgh is pretty damn cool after all these years. I seriously can't complain. Yeah, and that's what I think, like, a lot of us find about our particular home is that we really love it because of how comforting it is to us, right? It's familiar, and familiar is family, and that's why we love it so much, is because it feels like family. Even if you kind of, you know, even if you don't like a lot of things about it, you almost appreciate it anyway, just because of, just like family, you just kind of grow accustomed to who they are, and you know, you just kind of accept that. So just like every place, when people say, "Oh, I don't like this about it," it was just like, well, yeah, there's a lot of things that I don't like about it either, but I've grown to love them. Really, I've grown to accept it and deal with it. Regarding Chinese manufacturing, they are dealing with it by moving up technology chain, offloading simple manufacturing to Vietnam while investing in higher tech manufacturing in China. Yeah, and it's no doubt that it's going to take place, but just look at the people within themselves, right? I mean, they're raising their standard of living there, and they're making it very difficult to then manufacture there. So you can see how it is that the Cantillon effect is playing out in China, even though it may not necessarily be a consequence at this point, but you can see where it's working, right? And how it is that the manufacturing base there is now moving the cheaper manufacturing. And when you look at their people, you would probably see that they are starting to find like the luxurious experiences of buying the rare and oddities of America and, whatever other nations that are out there, and bringing them to China, because China doesn't produce those things. And the luxurious experience says, hey, I want something that nobody else has, right? And that's some of the things that you can probably be finding there in China. If you just look for it, you probably already see it. In fact, I think I found articles about that very thing. So it's not just a matter of them trying to deal with the situation, because they will, and they'll try, and there will be essentially progress in their effort. But think about it, them doing something is a sign that the problem is manifesting, or else they wouldn't be doing it. Right? It's just like tariffs. Tariffs is a sign of the Cantillon effect. It's a symptom of it. Otherwise, they wouldn't need the tariffs. They wouldn't need the subsidies. They wouldn't need to do any of this stuff, because everything would be hunky dory, right? Hey, infamous NYC, thank you so much for the $5, man. I really appreciate it. Very generous of you, man. Over these years, so very generous, man. Very supportive of the channel. Tariffs, check. Coming to business, people complaining, it should go back to the people. If you were invested, you got your money back. Yeah. If you were the asset holder, you're right, Infamous. I mean, in a roundabout way, but you're absolutely right. If you were the asset holder inside of that situation, then you would be getting paid back because your stock value would be going up, or something of that like kind of line of thinking. You're absolutely right. And you got to position yourself for that. Like, you can't position yourself to be you can, like, I like to work, right? I like driving the forklift around. I love loading people up. I love ringing up sales. I like working. It's fun. It's a good thing, right? I really enjoy the idea of doing like these YouTube videos and all kinds of stuff. And all that hard work and dedication and all that other stuff, like, I could put all the time and effort and energy in the world into this and love every single minute of it, but it doesn't really matter because there's not enough time in the day. And it doesn't really matter how much you get paid because I have to provide my presence in order to make it happen. So, as fun as it is, and as cool as it is, and as awesome as it is at times with, monetary wise, it still requires my presence. And the only thing that doesn't is asset allocation, right? So once you get into asset allocation, it doesn't require your presence. And that's really where the key to it is, because there was a time you could use your presence. You could use, your existence. Like, hey man, I'm here. I got energy to provide to the world, man. Let's do a fair trade. And that was cool. But now the fair trade is just like sinking into the abyss. And that's what's hard. It's hard for people to accept that. And I mean, it's hard. It was hard for me to like look at the Cantillon effect and think, is this really how it goes down? Like, I read these chapters over and over again, and I'm like, man, there's really no other way. It's just it, those who increase their expenditures, right? Who do not move into asset allocation, they're gonna find a difficult time. And we already see that. I mean, just think about all the people who complain about how hard it is out there right now. Well, I know from the time that I was 18 years old, for every $20 bill, every $50 eighth, that I had dumped into weed and booze and beer and whatever it was that I was doing for a good time, I know I would have millions now had I just positioned that into dividend paying stocks and didn't think about anything else. But I didn't think about that. I thought about, doing all the other stupid stuff with it. So it's my own fault, and I recognize that. And I look at what it is that kids can do nowadays in order to position themselves to have a decency. If they don't do that, think about it. Like, if you can position yourself into asset allocation inside of what it is that's taking place right now, the world is about ready to send the United States all the production. Or the whole system completely collapses. So if the world is about ready to send us their production, how is it that you think you need to position yourself in order to get a piece of that? I mean, do you think you want to work for it, like trade hourly wages for it? Or do you want to be in a position in which that the asset that you have owned is now being able to provide you with the ability to buy that foreign production? Like, what position do you want to be in? So most people are going to take their job and they're going to buy that foreign production with it, and there goes their money, right? Over to the foreigner. When they should be saying, I'm not going to increase my expenditures. I'm sorry, right? I'm going to deal without. I'm going to take this money and I'm going to position it to a secure rate of interest beyond that of my occupation. That's the direction that the people who do, like, when those people go that way, they're the people who are like, man, this ain't that hard, right? This isn't that big of a deal. All this stuff that's being produced out there in the world, like, I'm consuming that, right? That's what the asset holder ends up being in. And so when I think about how it is that 80% of the people are going to be smoking weed and drinking beer, because that's exactly what I did, right? Like, up until the point that I said, don't do that anymore. And I made a conscious choice to say, don't do that. But if I never made that choice, I would still be doing it today, never once ever positioning myself into anything. All right. 2 more minutes, guys, and then we're going to call it quits. Get some Infamous. I'm sacrificing to get rid. Oh, need to read those comments. What's going on? Okay. I have been sleeping in my truck now almost 6 years on and off, got rid of the apartment to save since I'm never around as a travel nurse. I shower at Planet Fitness and hit the gym before work and sleep at rest stops. Not easy, but I'm invested heavily. And see, this is the thing, like what Infamous is doing right now is essentially like how many years do you even have to really do that before you're going to be able to before you're such set in such a position that really you'll have your options will just be almost wide open, right? To do whatever it is you want to. You've already conditioned yourself to be in such a lifestyle that is so essentially, I'm not going to say deteriorated, but so like simplified that really anything from this point on would be like a step up into that luxurious experience, which would just essentially just be what most people would be considered normal. Like you get to enjoy luxury that most people would never have seen as luxury because you have essentially diminished your luxurious experience to what it is you're like to the least of what it is that you're willing to tolerate at this time. From this point on, the moment that you do move into a comforting or something that is like convenience, that all is going to like the new luxurious experience. Like people who get to dive into luxuries all their life don't know what that means. They don't know what it feels like to be in a luxurious experience. They have no idea what that is because they've experienced their whole life. But if you never had it or you were essentially limited on how much luxurious experience you get, when you do get that moment, that special thing, right? It is an enjoyable thing, right? It's actually something that you get to enjoy because it's not something that you've had in your experience your whole life. So that's really some of the best ways to enjoy your luxurious experience in the future is simply by depriving yourself of it. And then when you do move into it, like that, even the simplest move up would be like a profound luxurious experience for you, where most people wouldn't even give it any kind of consideration. It's all in the meaning you give it, right? All right. If I continue for 10 more years, I will be at 5 million. Wow. Wow. Right on. At 5 million with a retirement at 58 and will move into real estate, invest through Airbnb, but I work 60 hours a week and sleep in the truck most days. I get short. Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing, man. If you're saving at that point and that level, then you can take a moment, a week or a weekend and enjoy the weekend and get like basically recharge your batteries, right? Go and stay at a nicer hotel or something because it won't it ain't going to deteriorate it from your retirement that much. And you've already sacrificed so much. So you can take that moment to do it, right? And get that recharge. By a very financial system. Excessive luxuries is brought on by a very financialized system. I couldn't agree more, Benny. You're absolutely right. Having a wife and kids in the home is a luxurious experience. Absolutely, Moses. Absolutely, it is. Yeah. People think the luxurious experience is the car you drive. That's like, that's a very superficial luxurious experience. Most people don't understand what it is to be, to have a luxurious experience that is not a material, like most people look at it as like material things. Right. To be in a position in which that you live in a clean, friendly, nice, beautiful area, that's a luxurious experience. Okay? Having, a very quiet, nice household. Everybody gets along. There's no fighting or arguing or anything. That's a luxurious experience. So, yeah, most people look at like luxuries as materialistic things, things that they can see. Uh, and that's so far from it. That's not where that. Well, I mean, for some people, that might be the whole thing, right? And I mean, who am I to? That's the meaning they have given it. But for me, that's not it. That's not where the luxury lies. The luxury lies in my experience and how it is that I am able to go through this world. Like, people work incredibly hard so that they can live in an area where I grew up. Well, I don't know what it's like to live really anywhere else. And when I think about like where some places are and what the crime rate is, like, I wouldn't know how to handle that. I don't live in a high crime rate area. And we don't, I mean, there's crime, there's issues that come up, but it's pretty small. I mean, in Clatsop County, it's pretty quiet. There's no mean streets of Clatsop County. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's pretty chill here. But I know, I mean, I've been other places. I'm not naive, but to understand like the level of issues that some places have, I don't know how I would be able to handle that energy. Like, I didn't grow up in that. My luxurious experience was living in an area that didn't have that. And so as somebody says, "Oh man, you don't know how wonderful of an experience this is that you have here." And I'm like, I kind of do, but you're right, I don't, because I've never had any other experience other than this one. So knowing that to be the case, like, I hold on to this. People say, "Oh, dude, you could have moved away and found a much cheaper place to live." And I'm like, people work their entire life so they can end up here. Why would I leave this? Like, and anything else other than this would be like a lesser, right? And would be removing my luxurious experience and then deteriorating my life, right? It would have a very deleterious effect. I love that word, deleterious. All right. Oh, same here. Infamous started at 38, felt so damn late, but really wasn't when I talked to people at conferences. No, and that's really, I don't think there is. Infamous says I'll be 47 in September. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they're here's what's funny, all-nighter. Did you ever think that maybe you're already a millionaire? Like, you've already done the work to be the millionaire? It just hasn't happened yet, right? Like, that's what's really funny is, like, somebody was like, "Man, I got to work really hard to become the millionaire." I was just like, "You ever think that maybe you already did it? You just like, we just haven't gotten there yet." Yeah, like, you've already did the work that was going to make you the millionaire, that's going to put you in that millionaire position. You've already did that. But it's a matter of time and sticking to that energy and staying on that parallel in order to actually receive it. So it's just a matter of being in the receiving position of it, because the work has already taken place. Like, you already made the effort. You showed up at the conferences, you made the network, you got into the game, you started playing the projects, you started doing the thing. And now it's just a matter of time for it to manifest into the reality of your existence. But the work has already happened. Like, that's where I think about a lot of things on how it was that I was able to achieve some of the stuff. Like, people are like, "How were you able to do this?" And I'm like, really, when I think about it, it happened long before I even started the YouTube channel. Right. And so the work has already happened. That's why it shows up in our existence later on. And that's really where I think, like, for a lot of people who maybe even starting late in life when it comes to retirement, it was just like, but you hadn't, right? Because here it is today. You've started. It didn't actually start today because you had to think about it yesterday, in order to make it happen today. It's like, I mean, I don't know, maybe you made a snap judgment off of a whim. It's like, "Oh, I'm just going to do this right now." But most people generally think about it a little bit before it actually happens. So there was some work that was involved before the actual moment. Like, the moment that you actually make the difference, where you actually make the change, you make that first purchase, you open up the Roth IRA, you do whatever, whatever step it is that you think that is the right next one. And, people say, "Well, I started that day," but it wasn't that day, right? It couldn't have possibly have been that day because you had to think about it the day before. And there was something happening the day before that that got you to think about it. So there's stuff that was going on before that moment started. And people say, "Oh man, I'm so glad that day that I bought that first stock and started buying stocks." And it was just like, but it wasn't that first day. Like, that's the day you remember, but that wasn't the day that it started. Right. I mean, that was a very profound day. It was a moment. It was a remembered day. You could see it on the little deal right there. That was the day that it happened. But the reality is, it wasn't that day. Yeah, it was a day much earlier than that. And it might have been years before that happened that really created and manifested that day. And that's why the work has already been done. You just got to be on the parallel in order to receive it. and just keep going with the energy. You know what it is that energy is, right? I mean, if you're the landlord, do you go and surf? Right? I mean, no. Right? I mean, you don't go surfing if you want to be the landlord. If you want to be the landlord, you figure out networks, you figure out mortgages, you figure out contractors, you figure out that kind of thing. You don't go surfing. But if you want to be the surfer, then you don't go and you work on houses. You got to go surfing, right? There's just like, what energy do you want to be in? Once you're in those energies, you stay in those energies and you stay on that parallel. And then know that whatever it is that you have in your head and the idea and the imagination that you have dreamed up for yourself is going to then start to manifest itself inside of the reality, because you can't make it happen, right? You can't. You can try, and there's things that you can do to try and make it happen. And generally, if you force it too much, you'll have a counteraction to it, a counterbalancing. So instead, you have to just enjoy the moment, right? Just be in it. If you're in the moment right now, right here, doing this, then everything else is going to start lining up and then show itself to be where it needs to be inside of your life. Sometimes you need to be hit with pain. You need to suffer. You need to face consequences. You need to be punished. And people think, man, why? That doesn't make any sense. Why should I have to face all this consequence, this punishment, this deterioration? Why do I have to face this? And ultimately, it's because you didn't have the tools to deal with those problems. You didn't have them, and that's why you're facing the problems. And so, if you don't develop the tools and you try to avoid the problems, then guess what? The problems keep coming, and then you can't get further down the direction that you want to go. So, when you get hit with the pain, when you get hit with the problems, when you face the consequences of it, you should be thankful for that, saying, okay, another one of these tools that I have to pick up and learn so that I don't face this consequence again. Thank you, universe, for punishing me in such ways, as hard as it is to face. But I know now that I got this punishment that I'm not going to face this consequence in the same way. So I appreciate you. Can we move on, please? And that's the way that it should be taken, because you have to understand that, man, if you do not get faced with those punishments, how in the world could you possibly deal with the problem when it comes up? When you, like, think about it. If you had, say you made a grand, like a whole bunch of money one year, and then the next year you did it again, and you're like, oh man, this is it. I got this, right? And then it fell. And say that money was $100,000 that you had made, right? Like, it's not like, for some people that's like not that much, but for other people, like a working average working stuff, that's like an insane amount of money, right? So that's a lot of money. So you were able to make $100,000, and then you did that for a couple of years, and then boom, you fall down to like $60,000, and that's a huge hit, like 40% of your money, right? That's a hard hit to take, but going from 100,000 to 60,000, it's just like, dang, man, what a punishment. That's hard to deal with. That's like no more new car, no more vacation, no more all this other stuff. That's a hard punishment to deal with. Now you learn your lessons from that, because if that was $1 million a year and all of a sudden you lost that much, you're losing $400,000 a year. That's going to be very, very devastating feeling. And especially if you go from $1 million down to $50,000. And so, to understand the situation that you are faced, even if you make a lot and you get deteriorate, it's just like, boom, you got hit hard. It was just like, wouldn't you have rather have learned the lesson at that level than if it was much higher? Right? So be thankful that you got that punishment at that level so that you can learn to deal with it. Because if it was much higher than that, it would have been quite devastating. It wasn't so bad when it was hard. It hurt, right? It hurt when it fell. But if it was much higher and you took that hit, oh God. So be thankful that you took the punishment when you did. And that's how most people end up facing the downfall in their life, is they don't look through that. Man, I was going to quit this 10 minutes ago, but then I got to talking. All right. All right. Are we done here? I've seen it happen many times when a gig was done. People would file for unemployment off their children that were on the film set. I never drew unemployment. Wow. All righty, guys. We're going to call it quits. Thank you very much for joining in on today's live stream, diving into the luxurious experience. Thank you very much, Infamous. Thank you again. I didn't see the second super chat here. I started late and took to heart all your teachings of luxury and finance. I spent years partying and drinking in New York City clubs with nothing to show for it. I'm a late investor. I started late 30s. Hey, I mean, consider Infamous that I really feel like I'm still just getting started now myself. And I bet you're much farther ahead than I am. Right. And so we're all in our own game. And I don't compare myself. Like, I am proud to hear you say, man, that you're going to be at $5 million someday. Dude, that is so rad. That is like so rad. But I don't compare myself to that. Right. I don't know if I'm going to have $5 million one day. I don't even really think about how much money I'm going to have. I don't, I don't really care. Um, and it's not like I don't care about having money. Is this I don't care about what it is that I think that a lot of money would do. Like, I just don't like, for me, like, I want to go fly around and travel and do all that other stuff, and that would take money. Okay, so I got that part. But, like, having this massive amount of money and I'm thinking, oh, this is what I'm going to do with all this money. I don't dream like that, right? My dream is more like, I just don't care about money, and I don't need to care about money, because that's the relationship that I have with money, is that whatever I need is taken care of. No matter how extreme of a situation I am in, I got it covered, right? It doesn't matter what it is that I'm doing out there. The money issue part of it is the last thing on my mind. That's the life that I want to live, right? That's the position that I want to be, is to have it so unimportant, such the last thing on my mind of a consideration, that it essentially is irrelevant to me. And that is really where I want to be. Most people make it the focus of their life. Like, all the Trumpsters and partiers, all that stuff out there. That's what I think is, like, their thing. It's just like, how much do you have? How much more power can you get? $100 million? I got $250 billion. It's just like, well, how much money do you really need, man? It was just like, at that kind of level, it was just like, there's no other reason to do it other than the power that you get from it, right? And to me, like, that ain't power, man. Like, if you have to have money to have power in it, it's not real power, because once that money's gone, so is your power. But if you have the ability to get out and communicate, stand up and share with with the viewership, to me, it's not a matter of having a power with money. It's being in an energy where money is not the issue, right? It doesn't give you anything. It's hard. Putting yourself that disconnected from it in that way, while then focusing in on it as your main topic of discussion, is probably one of the hardest things out there for me to do. But I realized that a while ago that, man, being an investor and being an economist are definitely two different things. All right. They talk the same way. They share a lot of the same information. They kind of have a lot of the same views and whatever, but there is definitely two different things that are happening there. So economists are not investors, and investors are not economists. So when I think about a lot of the things that I share on this channel, I'm sharing at it from a true economist, from truly trying to be the economist point of view, not necessarily the investor. But investing is important to all of us here, because we have to be in the asset allocation or property ownership, right? And getting there is not easy, and you have to understand the money in order to get the right investment. See, this is where I find, like, most channels out there are really good at talking their logic on investment, but they don't necessarily key in on the understanding of the economic forces, or how it is that the economy plays out in a way that is outside of just their narrow view. And that's how, like, I think a lot of economists who have, like, essentially become famous or whatever, they've talked about it in such a way that, has gotten the attention of people because they all focused in on that same view kind of thing. And that's really where, like, my stuff ended up and getting lost. And it was just like, well, you guys should really, like, kind of ignore that and start paying attention to how the inflation expectation rises and lowers the real interest rates. And people are like, dude, go back to the mainstream, right? Go follow that, talk about those things. So as people, like those economists, focus in on what it is that everybody knows and is aware of, my economic point of view ended up just being deviated in such a way that most people just didn't see it. And then they ask me, well, how do we use this to invest? And I'm like, I'm not an investor, man. Right? Like, I'm not the investor. That's your job. My job is to talk about the economics. It is economics to invest. It's not. But when one thinks that it's not actually a good time, they may be missing it. That could be best time of their life. Well, I agree with that, but no, the economy, I mean, I guess it's economic for you, like as an individual, and I kind of see what you're saying there within the comment. But it's really important to understand that economics and investing are not the same thing. Like, they are those are not the same thing. Because really, one of them, like investing, is really trying to get a return on your investment, right? But economics is more about transactions. And now those two can combine, but they are separate. Those are not the same thing, because really, you can have transactions without investment. You know, thoughts on securing leverage to accumulate assets? Pretty risky these days. 2020 and ZERP was the time to do it. Well, yeah, if you're going to borrow money to buy an asset, then you might want to be pretty careful on where it is that you're borrowing money. See, this is one of the reasons why borrowing money to buy rental properties is one of the best ways to use leverage to buy an asset, is because really, where is it that you're going to get a loan that's as low of an interest rate as a mortgage is? Like, those are pretty low interest rates loans, as far as they go. So here it is, you get a cheap loan to buy a cash flowing asset with. It's like, it's literally set up in there. Most people trying to figure out how it is that they're going to borrow money to then use it to buy stocks and then whatever, and then hope that the stock goes up. Man, that's dangerous, and it's high risk, and there's, high interest involved, and it's just like very difficult. But yet here, property ownership has low interest rates to buy a cash flowing asset. And it's literally like built into the system to do it. Zuber is an economist and an investor. Mhm. And I agree. He has an economics degree, right? And he talks a lot of, economics with people, but he also talks a lot of investment. And through his investment mind, I've seen him make mistakes on some of the views that he has. And now, I'm not saying that it was a mistake inside of his investment. It's a mistake inside of the way that he was viewing how it is that the Federal Reserve was looking at interest rate adjustments. And now I've had that discussion with him, and it's just like, and there's nothing wrong with anybody's view or discussion with it. But, being an economist and an investor at the same time makes it very difficult to then not screw your economics view up with a bias of investment. You can't really be both. You can. I mean, there's obvious, that's what everybody does, right? But you can't really be both, because here it is. You're like, even like, let me give you an example. Zuber was asking me, it was just like, so if the unemployment rises to this particular level, the Federal Reserve will have to move. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but that's not the way that the economy is going. He was like, yeah, but if unemployment rises, the Federal Reserve would have to, adjust the interest rates down. And this was a long time ago we were talking about this. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm going to agree with you, Mike, but there's no point even having the discussion, because that's not going to happen. That's not the way this is going to go down. This is not the way the economy is rolling. It's not the way that the monetary policy is operating. All right? And as I tried to share right? This view, it became very difficult for people to internalize it because they were more focused in on how it is that the Federal Reserve was operating from essentially the prior to the great financial crisis issues, right? So they look at the Federal Reserve and a lot of the ways of the mechanisms and the tools that they had used from the past and try to incorporate them into today, and it's not working, right? It's falling apart for them. Mainly, like, just think about like inverted yield curve, the Somme rule. These sort of things were very much discussed, and I don't know about Zuber himself, but very much discussed out there within the economics point of view, especially those of the investors. But yet there was one economist out there saying, don't fall for that, right? Like, I don't know what you guys are going to invest in. I have no idea, but don't fall for this whole idea that the inverted yield curve is going to cause a recession. There's a recessionless recession coming. People ask me again, how do we invest in it? I'm like, I don't know, right? Go figure that part out for yourself, man. I mean, I got my own thing that I am doing, you know? And so, like, as people were like becoming the economist, but they were describing their investments, they had a very biased view towards it. I just said, I'm not using this to invest. I just want to know which way the monetary policy is going to go and whether or not this economy is going to become more or less restricted. And now, as I started focusing in on that, I cared less about interest rates in like where they were actually set at for investment purposes. Like, what happens with mortgage rates? What's happening with all these other things? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm more worried about the inflation expectation rising, lowering the real interest rates, making the economy less restricted, and nobody recognizing that. Right? Everybody has their own view. How are you going to invest into that? I don't know. I got my idea. I'm doing my thing, right? But what you're going to do, I don't know. Right? I know what Old Nighter's doing, but I don't know you know, if you want to go and do it that way, I mean, I think that's a pretty slick way of getting into property ownership, the way he's gone about it. So, it was just like, it's everybody has a decision to make. 100% agree with your perspective, and nothing is the same. The credible threat theory makes more sense to me. Yeah, and the more it's funny, it's like I get more and more people who are joining in on the community now, and it's not easy. You have to have the conversation, you have to have the discussion, and the problem with it is that you really can't go anywhere else for it. Only us. There's really nobody else who you can even bounce the idea and the theories off of, because there's nobody else out there who has internalized it like we have. Because we have discussed it so much, because we have shared information so much, because we have done so much research. I mean, you should check out the school community. Like, we got a guy, Dave, over there who is just like, I mean, he dove headfirst into the credible threat theory and came out with, like I said it before, there are people out there, like, I barely graduated high school. I didn't go to college. I have no financial background. I have nothing, like, no reason to be anywhere near this, right? But I found this thing, right? I found this and I shared it out there. And I knew that if I could get it to the right person or the right people out there, there's going to be individuals who will dive into this research and do a better job than I have. And those people are starting to show up at the community. Right? And that's what I'm finding. Like, just, I knew it was going to happen at some point. If I just stuck to it, the people would start showing up. And I see it starting to happen now. Dave he's taken the information and rolled deeper with it, shared a ton of that information with us over at the school community. And he's like, man, I can't help myself. I got to start my own. I said, dude, go for it, man. Right. So he's out there sharing like his research in, relation to what it is that he's learned from this theory. And now he's out there sharing that information too. It's just like, all right, it's a matter of time. Right? It's just a matter of time before this really starts to happen, and people are going to then start recognizing what it is that's happening and how this has taken place. And it all started right here, right? Let's see. Who's on Zcash train? They have set the inflation expectation, not US, not us. Memo. 2020 to 2023, I didn't really understand until I read the information to prove you wrong and came a believer. Hallelujah. I knew it. I knew it. That's why I put the information there. That's why I was just like, here, this is where I'm getting it from. Go ahead, read through it, tell me what you think, and just prove me wrong. And then people are like, all right, I'm going to totally prove you wrong. And then go through that and they're like, bro. And I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, dude. And I'm like, it's pretty incredible, isn't it? And they're like, I didn't see it before. I see it now. And I'm like, it's clear as day. And it's funny because like it takes some people a while. It's like almost like that. Like it's funny because I've talked to people where it clicked, like literally snapped for them one day when I was talking with them. It finally like just, it's like you almost see them like they're struggling to ride a bike. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden, just one day, dang, there they are riding a bike, right? Same thing. It's like it's this really odd thing that really takes place, but I've seen it happen several times. So I know that's what's going on, is that literally people have the social conditioning in which that we have grown up in, and makes it almost impossible to then see this without literally like, okay, saying, okay, I'm going to just like literally set down everything that I have ever believed so that I can take in a new thought. Right. And not try to argue against it, because once you start arguing against it, you will find yourself in a very frustrated understanding of it. But if you just say, okay, well, I'm just going to try and accept what it is that's being said here by the Federal Reserve itself, like not me. Right. Like, again, this isn't me. This is what I'm talking about, these speeches here and what it is that they have communicated within it. And if you start breaking these speeches down and looking at the different sections of them, and you start combining these things together after you've read through all of them, it's like, whoa. And then bang, it just snaps. And all of a sudden you're riding the bike and it's just like, holy crap. It's like a whole new view. And it's like, yeah, right. Oh, it's like, you ever seen those magic eye things where the picture's all blurry and then all of a sudden you can just see it, right? It's just like that. It works just like that. And it's so fun when it happens too. When you see people who finally like, it's just like, I finally get it, man, dude, all these things that you said. And it's like all of a sudden it's just like the keys just start lining up. Watching mainstream media with your views in mind makes MSM nonsensical. So I keep scrolling and end up watching you more. Thank you, Deja. Do you buy stock, Simon? Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. I have several different ways that I invest, right? And I've tried talking about this in the past, but it's pretty simple stuff that I do. Now, I think about it in exactly the category in which that I would want to focus in, like my real estate. I think about the house, right? Now, I also have some real estate stocks like DH Horton, like I got a builder stock. I have a global investment, stock that pays dividend yield. So not really trusting any of these things to a high level. I don't have like a big position inside of it, but I do take these positions. So I have like real estate in that sense. And then I have like cash flow. So I have a few different things that do cash flow, like dividend paying stocks. I got some kind of sillier, like alternative kind of ways of doing it. I staked cryptocurrencies. So I got those things kind of rolling in. So I got a few different things that I have like that. Investing in a 401k, like I got an employer match. So for me, like, the employer match is like almost a no-brainer. It's like 100% return just by putting it in there. Right? So that's kind of invested into the stock market in that fashion. I think about it in these different ways, like these different channels in which that you can position yourself. And so when I think like, do I buy stocks? Well, yeah, but I got stocks for different reasons. I got some stock because I wanted to have a dividend yield, and I have other stocks because I want to position towards real estate. I have cryptocurrencies But then I also have like Coinbase, which is essentially owning a stock that has exposure to the cryptocurrencies because it's essentially like a cryptocurrency bank. And so for me, like that's how I kind of position and work it for me is like I want to be exposed to different parts of the economy. Like if I want to be exposed to real estate, most people just think, okay, well, you have to own property. But that's not really the case, right? You can be exposed to real estate and own stocks. So you can be into stocks and be into real estate because you've gotten exposure to real estate through stocks. Now people say, "Oh, that's not the same. You don't get the same benefits and taxes and all this other stuff from being a landlord." It was like, well, wait a minute here. We didn't talk about the exact way of getting into real estate. We were just talking about getting exposure to real estate. And by buying into those stocks, you get exposure to it. So for me, when I think about like, how is it that you want to be in those particular things and how much exposure you want to them, think about the different styles in which that you can get towards those things. Again, you don't have to buy a house to be in real estate. Yeah. You can be in real estate in all kinds of ways that doesn't actually have the physical ownership. It's a privilege, luxurious experience to pay taxes. You're kind of right. Yeah. You're kind of right on that, man. Or Moses. Yeah. Man, you guys kept me out here later than I wanted to be. But thank you so much for hitting that like button. We got 57 people who have hit the like button. We have some really awesome comments that are going through here. I want to thank you very much, Infamous, for all the support for the channel and those super chats. It's very generous of you, man. I want to thank everybody who has become a member of the channel here. We do some member-only videos occasionally. I haven't been doing nearly as many as I should. But I really appreciate everybody who's gone over and become a member of the school community. It's really been an absolute like it's turning out better than I had ever imagined. It's not necessarily as popular as I was hoping for it to be, but I think that's actually a benefit to the community because really the people who are there are incredibly serious about what it is that we are discussing there. And, you can see it within some of the comments here on the channel. The conversations that we have over there are on another level, and the quality of them is just second to none. So I look forward to it. I know I push it out here a lot on the Uneducated Economist YouTube channel, but it really is the only place that I can think of that you could ever go to have an actual conversation about this whole theory, about the information. It's all there for you. We have other people who are sharing their information now and what it is that they have researched and they've studied. And it's really like it's growing into ultimately the center hub of what it is that's going to expose what I feel is the Federal Reserve's true monetary policy. And once everybody knows it, I just don't think it'll work anymore. So really, it's maybe like, this may be the ground floor of like that whole idea of ending the Fed, but that's even a far off concept within that. But it doesn't matter. What really does matter is that what we are doing there is building a community of like-minded individuals who are seeing this and seeing this theory, seeing the understanding from it, seeing the underlying economic forces in a way that can now be described and shared with other people so that they can then get that aha moment too. And that's really like, I can only put out so many videos. All right. And I can only have so many views of it. But once you start getting into a community of other people who have internalized it, now you got a lot of other views. And I can tell you, like, guys like David who have really taken this theory and dove deep into it with their own understanding and their own research have taken it to another level, So I wish Simon would talk about the bond buybacks. I talked about the bond buybacks 2 years ago, and then I just did a video the other day about it. Like, what did you miss about them? Deplorable. I did like the video I did 2 years ago is describing what it is that's happening right now, and people think it's like it's a new thing. I don't understand. I mean, this is something that was well described and articulated by the Treasury Department before it ever took place. that they were going to do this exact thing. And we know through the credible threat theory how it is that the information being deployed by the Treasury, by the mainstream media, really is more in line with what it is that they need the markets to hear in order to get the outcome that they are looking for. They know the specific words and sentences to use. Okay? But this bond buyback was more about pulling off old bonds with lesser premium to them, so the newer on the run bonds had more liquidity. And that's really what it comes down to. And that's the way they described it years ago. You know, I mean, it was, I talked about this on stage at Zuber's conference. And the very first time I had ever spoken at Zuber's conference, I talked about this. And I don't know how many people remember, because, it was such a weird thing to be talking about and hearing about. And people were like, I don't even know what it means to have a bond buyback. And it was like, okay, well, here, it's going to take place at some point. They're going to make a big announcement out of it, make it a big deal. And ultimately, the whole idea behind it is to make sure that the market participants know that there's a buyer of these bonds. What the Treasury is offering to buy isn't that big, right? It isn't that much. But what the market believes behind it is very, very impactful to what it is that the liquidity is going to mean, or what it means for the liquidity within the market itself. See, here's the problem. If you got these big banks sitting on a bunch of old bonds that have been sitting there for, in existence for a while, those things carry less of a premium to them. It's not like the yield on them pays any less or the price of them is any lower or anything like that. The problem that it comes to is that brokers don't necessarily want them because they're going to mature. And once they mature, they have to buy a new one to replace it, right? That's the reason why they don't like these older bonds. And if they have to buy a new one to replace it, there's another fee and another commission or whatever it is that goes with it. So these new on the run bonds, they get to buy those. They have a little bit higher premium on them. They sit on their portfolio for much longer until they reach maturity or until they decide to sell them. But if they buy these older bonds, right, these older, essentially off the run bonds, they don't carry as much liquidity. The brokers don't want those things necessarily because they are going to mature before they actually want them to. And so therefore, they don't carry as much liquidity to them. And that's what the Treasury is trying to remove. They're like, hey, we'll get those ones off of there and replace them with new ones. How does that sound? And the market says, yeah, sounds great. Go for it. But it's not going to fix the problem of interest rates. It's not going to do all these other things that people seem to want to think it's doing. It's not for that. Right? It's to make sure that the market stays liquid, and getting old bonds off the market and putting new ones on just makes that much more of the market liquid. That's what it's all about. Right? It's not about interest rate manipulation. It's not about that. Maybe some, I guess, but that's not the whole point of it is to make sure that the bond market stays liquid. And if you have a guaranteed buyer of the U.S. Treasury saying, hey, we're buying back our own bonds, well, then you got the market should be like, okay, well, cool, man, no worries then. And it doesn't really matter what it is that people say about what's going on there. The result of it is that they're taking those old bonds off and putting newer bonds on the market that have more liquidity. And that was the intention from 2 years ago when they said that this is what they were going to do. So that's what I said 2 days ago, and it's what I said 2 years ago too. Or there's no difference in the story. My story doesn't change. That's why it's easy for me to do this, and why everybody says, dude, you just repeat the same things over and over again, is because my story is the only one that doesn't change. Everybody else is flying on the and the winds of whatever it is, the news narrative that's being deployed out there. They have to suffer the consequences from it because they've already committed themselves to a belief system that doesn't have anything to do with any kind of commitment to their view. It just had to go with whatever, was popular at the time. And that's what they went with. And now they're like, oh, the Fed lies. The Fed don't know what they're doing. And they make up all these stories because essentially they can't stick to the one story because they don't have one story to stick to. Because they don't have a story, right? Like, my story is always the same. It's very consistent because it's only one right story. I can't change my right story. If I can tell the same story over and over again and say, look, it's still right. Here it is. So years later, it's still right. 2 years ago, I talked about the bond buyback program for a particular reason to keeping the market liquid. Here it is occurring. I'm not changing my story. It's still the same story. All right. The Genius Act is God, man, you guys kept me out here for 2 hours. I was going to go to bed like an hour ago. Okay. The Genius Act is going to make things run hot and fast soon. I understand what's happening and have started the process already to take advantage of the new dollar positioning in global markets. There you go, Mama. See, this is the thing. Like, the research and the view that Memo is doing is unique to what he's doing. I didn't take that view, right? I'm not looking at it in this way. He's going to take it and run. He's taken the credible threat theory in the view that he has, and he's like, man, I'm going to go and invest in this direction with it. You see how, like, I didn't use the credible threat theory for that, right? That's what he's doing. And that's why having an example of what it is that somebody could do with this, it doesn't really matter. The examples don't matter. In fact, it's better not to have examples of what it is that somebody could do, and it's better to understand what it is that you can do for your own benefit. Because looking to somebody else and saying, well, their example of it, it's not going to work for you. Right. And it's just, it might be a good idea or something. You might use, pieces or parts of it. But for the most part, you're going to have to invent your own wheel. All right. A report shows the ability to increase lending by 7 trillion or 23% growth in lending. Oh my goodness. Same here, Memo. Not enough of a position, but I'm still early in my journey. And again, All-nighter, I mean, I honestly think like you might be early in the journey, but I think you've already got the $1 million. Or the $1 million worth of real estate. Like I honestly believe that it's already happened, and that it's just a matter of time to manifest into your reality. Like I really honestly believe that. And for a lot of individuals, I kind of see that taking place. It's almost hard. Like I kind of see it in myself in a lot of ways, but like I try to keep myself grounded in the ideas of what it is that I really want. But I have big dreams for myself, and I kind of see myself doing things that are much bigger than I've already done. And I think to myself, man, I've already done some pretty cool things. Like I knew at some point in my life that I wanted to get on stage and I wanted to share some thoughts with people. I wanted to meet Ron Paul. Like those were two big things. It practically happened on the same day. And so I didn't get to meet Ron Paul, but he was like right over there. And I got to speak on the same stage to the same audience as he did. And that to me was close enough. Like I got that. So the path that got there started so long ago that I couldn't ever have imagined that what I was doing at the time was going to create the results of being on that stage. So again, when I think about where it is that All-Nighter is headed and the path that he has already put himself on and the things, like it's already there. It's just a matter of time to manifest into the reality of it. Very much like the things that I was doing long before I started the YouTube channel literally manifested me being on stage meeting Ron Paul. Well, what started that was long before the YouTube channel. Look at your phone, All-Nighter. All right. Not many people know anything past survival or the 9 to 5, maybe the weather and the local hot topics of the news hour. All-Nighter knows the news is manipulated. Yeah. Well, it's funny how I can say things to people that will just like completely confuse them and just, they'll just be like boggled down by some of the things that I just say. But then if I take a moment, I can really explain it in great detail exactly how it is that they can view the economy. They'll be like, whoa, they'll get some clarity. And 5 minutes later, they'll forget exactly what I said. All right. Now, I've done it several times just for the fun of it, where people will be like, "Hey, man, what's going on in the economy?" And I'll blast it off really quick. And I was just like, I'd say to them, "Well, I'm assuming that you probably have elevated inflation expectations, and that's going to lower the real interest rates. It's going to make the economy less restricted, and most people are not going to see that happening as the top asset holders continue to consume, where we'll have this resilient consumer, and yet the bottom like percentage of people, 80%, are going to be wondering why they can't get a house." And they're like, uh, yeah, they don't understand anything I said, right? They like maybe got little pieces of it or something. And somebody asked me what's going on, and I say, well, I said, do you know what happens when inflation rises? They say, yeah, everything goes up in price. I said, did you ever think about having an investment that's paying you 5%, and then you get an inflation that rises 5%, and it makes your investment neutral? And they stop and they think about it for a second. I said, think about it. You got an investment, it's paying 5%, but then you have inflation that's 5%. What happens to your investment? And I'm like, yeah, that kind of sucks. And I'm like, yeah, it really does, doesn't it? I said, can you imagine if you were paying a debt that was 5%, but then you have inflation that rises 5%, and all of a sudden your debt gets neutralized? They think about that and they're like, wait a minute. I'm like, well, if you were the investor who had lent the money to the person who was paying you, and the inflation rises and it hurts the investor because it neutralizes that loan, what happens to the borrower? Right? Pretty soon the wheels are clicking inside of that. So you raise that inflation expectations even more, and now you've lowered that real interest rate. Here it is, the investor is getting incredibly punished as they get a 5% return, but inflation's running up to 7%. Now they're negative 2% on their interest rate. But the borrower is negative 2% on their loan. They're actually getting paid to hold an asset that is increasing in value faster than they can pay it off. They're literally getting paid to sit there. That is incredible to think about. And when people think about that for just a minute, they sit back and they're like, okay, I'm the investor. I get a 5% return. Inflation rises 5%. It neutralizes the loan. Inflation rises a little bit higher. The investor gets punished and the debtor gets a benefit from this? Holy moly, how do I get, like, you see, all of a sudden, these things start clicking out there. So I can take the time and explain it to somebody, right? And if they hold on to it, they might be able to use it. But most people will go like, wow, that's really interesting. And then 2 minutes later, they'll forget everything that I said. Yeah. Simon, make sure All-Nighter send you the link to my book. He's going to keep the investment car manual to himself. Devaluing the dollar to pay our interest. But that's not, I mean, that's the excuse that people want to use. Right? That's the excuse that people want to use. That's where like they put this accusatory, kind of tone on the government, on the banking system, and they like, want to blame them for creating this kind of scenario of de-dollar valuation in order to pay the interest payments and stuff like that. Now, I mean, okay, we can agree to that and to say, yeah, that's what occurs from it. But the reality of the situation is that we have chosen to continue down this path, and that is going to be a result of it. We do not have to accept dollars. We didn't have to accept the Federal Reserve note when the Federal Reserve note came into existence. We do not have to accept the Federal Reserve notes today. We choose to. We choose to use the debt. We choose to use the dollar system. We choose to be in this. And those who look at it and say, oh man, I choose to be in the system, but I don't like these particular aspects of it that need to change about it, that's an unfortunate consequence for you. They're not going to change. So we have to adapt to the situation. And although those things might be out there, might be very true, to try and internalize it and to try and fix it or deal with that as one of our, focus points or something, I think is going to be very consequent. It's going to be a consequence that you will pay for lack of thinking about what it is that you could be doing with your life in a more productive way, like understanding or researching or getting more into, business or dividend paying stocks or rental properties or whatever it is. By focusing in on how it is that they are doing this as a manipulating tactic, I think is less helpful at the end of it. And so for me, like, are they doing it so that they can eat the debt away or erode the debt away or, all that? I don't think so, because the debt only grows bigger. It's not like you're getting rid of the debt, right? This expansion is going to go to the point till the day that it can't. And the day that it can't is so far off into the future, I can't see it. So I'm not even contemplating that idea. It's like we have ever increasing amounts of new dollar issuance and debt and separation and imports and possible UBI payments and all this other stuff that are coming that are going to be quite wild. And I totally get it. Like when it happens, it's going to be pushed in a political realm, but we have to push back against it all and say for ourselves and think for ourselves in a way that says, okay, how are the underlying economic forces creating this? Right? How is it creating this event? Why are they doing it this way? Because of these underlying economic forces. And if we then blame it to say, well, they're just trying to deal with their debt and make themselves rich. Okay, well, we can forget about understanding all the underlying economic forces. It doesn't make any sense anymore. All right. This time I'm going to go to bed, guys. It's now, we got 4 minutes left here before we hit the 2-hour mark. And yeah, I'm done. All right. The interesting thing also is some say Lindsey Graham's playing never came back to the day that Friday from the Ukraine. I'm just saying, notice the markets at the time of Lindsey Graham's departure. Notice the war. Like, this is very conspiratorial in my mind. Yeah. I mean, being elected in the South Carolina, meanwhile, market surged. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I used to get into a lot of conspiratorial stuff, but nowadays I kind of just stick to what it is that I can, find and what it is that I can see taking place from the words spoken of their, of the policymakers themselves. I used to fall into a lot of like, rabbit hole kind of stuff. And I don't know if like really any of it ever benefited me in any kind of way. Like maybe some people might be able to like use it to see some market movements taking place out there and then they can position themselves accordingly like that. But for me, I just found that it was more entertainment and it was more, deteriorating to the mental health than it was to any kind of benefit. So I kind of steered away from like conspiracy theory ideas nowadays, and I really stick to what it is that I have found spoken directly from the policymakers themselves. And that way, all the rest of the stuff that's happening out there, it really is less relevant to me than where it is that like inflation expectations go. Because to me, everything else doesn't really impact the Fed's decision in that way. You know, I mean, I can't find it, and whether, I mean, I feel like I've been fairly accurate on calling out the Fed's movements, how it is that the Federal Reserve has been reacting to a lot of the information, how it is that they've dealt with their monetary policy. And most of the things that people have brought up saying, oh man, the Fed is going to be forced because of these particular reasons, within a few months, those reasons are gone. Like, where are those guys now? I thought they were going to fire Powell. I thought they were going to fire Lisa Cook. I thought I thought Trump was going to take over the Fed. I thought, all these other things that people said, oh man, you just wait and see, it's going to happen. And then all those things come and go. And I'm like, where are you guys? I mean, you were so smart about this. You thought for sure that the Federal Reserve was going to lose the position and Powell was going to get fired and Lisa Cook was going to get fired and there was going to be all this interest rate drops because Trump was getting in the middle of it. Where are you guys? I mean, where's your profound understanding of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy so that, you can share it with us now that is all gone from the narrative? I mean, I understand it's not easy. Sometimes you fall victim to the narrative, when it happens out there. But if you have a better understanding of the monetary policy that's rooted from their own words and their own documents and statements from all the research that you've done, it doesn't really matter what's being spoken out there. You already have your belief system. Because none of that stuff out there, that firing of Lisa Cook and Jerome Powell and taking over the Fed and lowering interest rates, it didn't happen. What economist out there was telling you, don't fall for that stuff? It's a bunch of noise. They're just pushing this inflation expectations around. Don't fall for it. Right? I mean, people say, man, you gotta be more concerned about these things. And I'm like, why? They're making you concerned for their own benefit. Why do you want to fall victim to that? That doesn't make any sense to me. It's just like, I see exactly what they are trying to do with inflation expectation, the neutral interest rate, the nominal interest rate, how that restricts or ease financial conditions. There's this great calculator that I put together. In fact, I don't even know how to write code. I asked AI to write me a code to create a calculator so I could figure out how restrictive or accommodating the economy is based on the neutral interest rate, the nominal rate, and inflation expectation. It's on a slide bar that you can just move those numbers around to wherever you want so you can see whether or not the economy is restricted or accommodating. That is pretty damn cool, right? These tools that we have put together are used in such a way that is now giving you a better understanding of how restricted or easing the economy is based on this inflation expectation and how the neutral interest rate is positioned in relation to that nominal rate. Very few people discuss this, but when it's the only focus that you have is like, man, pay attention to right there, because that's going to tell you if the economy is more or less restricted. Everything else is noise. Everything else is literally noise. And then when you listen to the noise, it was like, how much noise is out there? And it was just like, okay, hey, with all that noise, are you raising or lowering the inflation expectation? You're raising that inflation expectation? Gotcha. Okay, on my little graph calculator, I'll slide that inflation expectation up and watch the neutral interest rate or watch the real interest rates come down and the economy become less restricted. This is pretty easy to watch. Now, if I fall victim to the narrative out there, man, you would have no idea on what was happening. You'd think that Jerome Powell was about ready to get fired, or Lisa Cook, and like either one of those have any kind of change to the Federal Reserve's monetary policy when you got 10 other voting members. Maybe we should learn who those voting members are and what it is that they have been talking about. Yeah. Just maybe. All right, Mo. God, that sounds. It has been so long since I've drank a beer. I've had near beers. I've had some pretty good non-alcoholic beers like that are out there, but you know what ends up happening? This is what ends up happening. It's like, I'm cool with it. Like, I don't get triggered by it or anything like that. I haven't drank for 10 years. But I do the same thing when I drink one of those non-alcoholic beers. Is I crack it open, I take the first drink, and I'm like, oh, that is really good. Such a good reminder of back in the day of hanging around the fires or out at the beach or cruising around up in the woods or something like that. And then I take that big giant guzzle off of it. And I wait for that tingling buzz that never comes. It still happens every time. Right? Like I can enjoy the beer and not feel like I want to get that buzz, but something in me, man, I want to guzzle a bunch of it and I want to feel the tingle from it because of that idea that comes from it. So I know the trigger is still down in there somewhere deep, but I have enough willpower that I don't go out there and actually consume alcohol. But that still happens, right? That still happens. You help me stop listening to the news and politics. Thanks again, Simon. Yeah, you bet. Well, the thing is like once you get the theory down, you can't help yourself. You'll listen to the news and politics, and you'll just shake your head, and it'll just be so. It's just so like I don't know, frustrating, and I don't know how to put it. Like you can just see the wrongness within it. It's just like it's like listening to somebody stupid speak, and it's just like you can't take it anymore. You can only handle so much of it, and then it's like, okay, I can't listen to this anymore. Right? Because it's just so far off from the reality of what it is that you now see. It's just like listening to somebody completely speak of like I don't know, it's just completely speaking this is like gibberish or something up there. It's just like, oh, what are you guys even like communicating? Once you get this theory down, it's like none of that stuff makes sense anymore. It's like as if they are just making it up out of thin air. I rarely drink, usually only on my vacation I'll have a drink, but now if I do, it's beer cider. Oh, pooping while standing. I love the name. I have stopped watching news this week since so many are trying to portray Lindsay Clancy as the victim for killing her 3 kids. Oh, okay, Lord. All right. Financial advice for anyone that smokes cigarettes. If you can quit, switch to tobacco pipe. It's way cheaper and more enjoyable. I'm an addict, so I still listen for entertainment. Yeah. Here's the thing. I'm going to leave you with guys with this. One of the problems that we face a lot of times um, by surrounding ourselves in a particular energy or environment. And now the news is no different from being in a group of people who are carrying toxic energy. That news is just as toxic. And now here's the problem that we end up facing with most of this is that we are bombarded with like I don't even know 40 billion bits of information all day, right? So all these pieces of information are constantly flying at us. I got like the TV in the background is playing. I can hear, my family kind of messing around in the back of the house. I'm watching the comments here. There's all kinds, there's lights here, kind of coming on, pointing at me. There's all kinds of bits of information that are constantly surrounding us in every single direction. And now we personally, when we are in this environment, can only really actually observe maybe 30 or 40 bits. Right? There's only just a few pieces of this that we can actually pay attention to because, we got like, we're driving the car, we got to pay attention to the stoplight, the person over there. All the rest of the bits of information that are flying just end up kind of just being out there on the secondary, and we focus in on the 30 or 40 that we can actually grasp and pay attention to at the moment. The unfortunate problem is that even though we're only paying attention to those 30 or 40 bits and the ones that we want to, and we see that there's issues out there and say, hey man, I don't like that toxic thing. I don't like that negative aspect over there. If it's in your view, if you can hear it, if you can see it, if you can, be in presence of it, if it's being experienced, then what's happening is those bits of information are flying into your field. Right. And although you're trying to let it pass through, you're like, hey man, I'm not down for this. I don't want any of this in my life. Right. I'm not having it. That's you're over there. It's in the background. I'm not paying attention to. Well, this bit of information is flying at you because you can't stop it. You're in the presence of it. Right. And now you're going to just let it go and let it pass through you or let it pass by. Well, the only problem is that it leaves a residual. Right. So now it's gone through your field and you carry this with you. You can't stop it. It's already now present within your field, within your energy. You're thinking about some of the things that you heard. That's them, that's over there. That doesn't have anything to do with me, but yet you're walking along and that conversation is now playing in your head because you can't help it. It's an experience that you had. Whether you want to or not, whether you're actively thinking about it, it occurred. And now it's now writing with you. Right? It's now writing with you. And this is now being incorporated into everything that you do. Every decision that you make, every interaction that you have, it has this residual bit that has gone through, that is, whether one that you wanted it or not, and hey, this is over there, but now you're carrying, you got it, right? And now it may not be as impactful or serious as that 30 or 40 that you're actually focusing in on, but to think that it isn't there, nah, man, it's there, and it's being carried, and it's being used. And it's part of the power pendulum that you are on, that you are trying to focus and be like actively headed towards the idea that you're going for. But yet here you have this residual energy that's being carried with you, that maybe even one that you don't even want. Yeah. So it's important. It's important on where it is that you're getting your information, what it is that you're listening to, this is one of the things, like, it's important to surround yourself with the 5 people who are most like the energy in the position in which that you want to be in. Because when you have those 5 people around you, what you're doing is you're filling your energy filled up with all that bits that they carry, right? All the interest rate investments, dealings with all the other stuff, all this information is now being carried with you, but you have to be surrounded by that. If you're surrounding yourself with that and some toxic stuff, now you're going to incorporate the toxic stuff into what it is that you had gotten from these people. That's why you have to exclude the toxic out, and you just surround yourself with the 5 people that you want to be most like. Right? And then you get those bits of information to fill in your field, and then you start moving into that direction. Right, all-nighter? Mm-hmm. All right, man. This has been a great live stream. It's gone on for quite some time now. We have 81 people who are watching right now, 76 likes. Thank you so much for hitting that like button. We have had quite a few people who have hit the like button tonight. That's one of the easiest ways to support the Uneducated Economist. All the comments, the engagement in the channel, and all the support. Thank you very much for that. Infamous NIC, dude, for all the years you've been with the channel and all the support for the channel. Thank you so much for being here and everything that you've done to contribute to the channel. All-nighter, man, awesome job as always with all the moderation you do for not just the Uneducated Economist, but literally, what is it, like a dozen channels or something you moderate for? It's like, it's amazing, man, what it is that you have actually, been able to pull off here in the few years that, since we've met. So it's just quite incredible to see this community grow, and, to see us, really taking this thing to what I feel is like, the next level up. And it's been fun. All right. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.